MST Unit Rising Water Levels and Their Effects by Sabrina Bressi. The expected audience is a second grade class including some possible ELL students. The expected size is 24 students who are already familiar working on the school computers. The first lesson is a science lesson, with the focus question being, how does water act at different temperatures? The way to connect or motivate the students was to mention how I saw Frozen the movie, and I came up with a really silly question being, why can't I have any snow in summer? The objectives for this lesson is that students will be able to illustrate what objects may melt into liquids or become solids by freezing, and to explain how melting and freezing happens. The steps that the teacher would take to perform this lesson would be to use videos and simulations that show how water will turn into ice and how ice will turn into water in different situations. The lesson will then go over what are the required situations for water to change state, such as it being really cold or really hot. Throughout the lesson, we will be going over vocabulary with many visual aids to support all students. The student work will require the students to work in groups, creating a poster showcasing the various circumstances in which matter can melt or freeze and present it to the class. The posters will have various examples including ice cream or ice, water, and the sun or fire to show how it melts. Since now the students know about how water changes state, the second science lesson will focus on melting glaciers. The focus question is, do melting glaciers affect seawater levels? The way to connect this or motivate to the students is to tell them a story about how my house was flooded, and we would brainstorm how it happened and how to stop it. The objectives are the students will be able to explain what causes rising water levels, test ways to stop flooding, and analyze why flooding may be harmful. In this lesson, the experiment requires an inclined paint tray that is clear, some water, some ice, and a pretend house made out of a plastic water gallon. The teacher will add the pretend house at the top of the incline and some water at the bottom of the incline. They will also add a big block of ice and then mark what the water level is at. Then, after some time, the teacher and the class will measure what the water level is at after the ice melted. For the student work, students will get the same setup in a group plus some extra materials, and their goal will be to try to prevent the pretend house from getting flooded using their materials. During the share-out, the students will talk about how this applies to us in real life and what potential dangers exist due to rising sea levels. The third lesson will be a math lesson, with the focus question being, how do we count by 100s and by 10s? The way to connect or motivate the students was to pretend that the blocks of 10s and the blocks of 100s were glaciers, and today we were going to measure the ice sheets or the size of the glaciers. The objectives are students will be able to count by 100s and count by 10s. The steps the teacher will take will be to first going over how counting by ones works. And that is very simple. We'll just count from 1 to 10. The next step will be to show how it works to count by tens and how it's very similar to counting by ones, except there's a 0 at the end. There is also a song included in the lesson to help them remember how to count by tens. The final instruction will be to go over how to count by 100s and how it's very similar to counting by tens or counting by ones. We will conclude and summarize how 10 of the ones makes up a bundle of 10, and 10 of the tens makes up a bundle of 100. The student work will require the students to work in pairs. Each pair will receive a handful of 100 plates and a handful of tens, and then they will work together to count each group. Afterwards, each group will present their answers to the class, and they will end the lesson with a worksheet which will be used to reinforce the strategy and assess the students on how they're doing. Lesson 4 is a technology lesson, the focus question being, how do we conduct research? The connection or motivation for the students is to explain how I've done a lot of research this week on glaciers, and I wanted to show them how we can all do research together. The objectives are students will be able to use a research engine and filter through the results for relevant information, and to use an application to look up reliable definitions and explanations. First, we will start out by going over the many available search engines. For this lesson, I used Ecosia. I will instruct them not to use Wikipedia for research, even though sometimes it could help us find some answers. I will explain to them how to look for reputable sites, including well-known organizations such as National Geographic, universities, which include sites ending in .edu, and sites ending in .net or .org. The students will then be tasked to use the search engine to look for more information relating to the rising sea levels and the melting glaciers. They will note some facts that they learned from these websites and save the websites on a Word document with my instruction. Lesson 5 is the second technology lesson, the focus question being, how do we present our research? The connection or motivation was to explain to the students that their research that they completed was really phenomenal, and that we wanted to use their research to present it to the rest of the school. The objective is students will be able to use an application to create a presentation and to use their research information for a presentation. First, the teacher will go over what infographics look like, what they're used for, and how we'll be making one today. The teacher will do a walkthrough on how to use the Canva application and answering questions as they come up. The student work will task the students to create the infographic using the research that they have gathered from the internet and everything they have learned throughout the week about the melting glaciers. Their final project is intended to be shared with parents, faculty, and other students throughout the school.